And during election, these were the guys who were told, hey, we're going to sort you out. Now they're on the streets, they're active. And I love to see that they're active. I've never seen anything like this before. We can't do things haphazardly. The youth are woke. Let's be aware of that.
It would have made much sense if after all these taxes, the government gives us free education, government gives us free healthcare, government gives us subsidized transport rates.
Kenyatta Avenue, the streets are charging. The crowds are charging. Hawatasimama maovu ya kitawala. It is crazy. Running battles all day. We are tired. Tear gas all over. The crowds are crazy. Placards, diapers, sanitary towels, everything, you name it, they are carrying it.
What is this about the finance bill that doesn't sit well with you?
All right. I mean, aside from the obvious things that are going on, I'm here in solidarity with, of course, I'm a journalist, I'm a broadcaster, and I primarily speak to the audience that is on these streets. And the one thing that they've been complaining about, no jobs, they've been complaining about harsh economic times. On top of that, coupled with unable to date, unable to marry, unable to settle down, no prospects of even building a house one day, right? They've been called the hustler generation. And during election, these were the guys who were told, hey, we're going to sort you out. Now they're on the streets, they're active. And I love to see that they're active. I've never seen anything like this before. And I've been a journalist for over 14 years. So I can tell you that clearly something has changed. And I've been going around speaking to a lot of the youth. The one thing I'll tell you, they're super peaceful. You can hear them. But the agitators in this situation, unfortunately, are the police. As you can see, my eyes are red. You see Bangi?
Yes.
You see the effects Zagava? You know, I didn't even ask for it. I came to cover peacefully. I've been sitting here talking to people. Look at them. Watch this, what will happen next. They will throw tear gas into the audience. So we have to be here to witness, to tell people what is happening, so that, because you know what happens. If we don't come and cover, some people will be dead by now, right? So we have to be here in the numbers to cover, so that we ensure that if they're calling it a peaceful protest, which you've witnessed, then.
If this is your Kenyan president right now, William Ruto, what would it be that you would tell him? A sentence or 2 or 3 or 4?
To be honest, I feel like we can't do things haphazardly. The youth are woke. Let's be aware of that.
Widespread protests in Kenya against proposed new taxes. Police criticised for using excessive force. Many on the streets are young, mobilised by social media. Why is the government pushing the new taxes? And why has there been such a reaction? This is Inside Story. Fierce protests across Kenya, violent crackdown by police, and the worst unrest since President William Ruto came to power less than 2 years ago. It was all triggered by government efforts to increase taxes to help cut the national debt and pay back its lenders, including China and the International Monetary Fund. Young people have led the protests, with social media prominent too. Police have used gunfire on peaceful protests, with fatalities, injuries and mass arrests condemned by civil liberties groups. The government has offered some concessions, but it hasn't eased the tension. So why has this bill brought so much anger, and what are the wider implications? We'll get to our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Laura Khan.
Undeterred by clouds of choking tear gas, these young Kenyans are taking to the streets in their thousands with a clear demand. They oppose the government's plan to raise $2.7 billion in additional taxes, under pressure from the International Monetary Fund. The protest, dubbed Occupied Parliament, started in Nairobi on Tuesday and have since spread nationwide.
This bill, we can't let it pass. We want to reject it completely, and that's why we are here. It's our duty to protest against the bill.
Kenya is ruled by poverty. We have no education. Most of our people are unlearned. They cannot write, they cannot read. And the government still wants to pull away the budget.
Roads around Parliament were sealed, with both the noise and the message seemingly not reaching politicians. They held a second reading of the bill on Tuesday, but not all agreed.
This bill was a disaster. This bill is assuming that the Kenyans' tax rate should move to a higher rate regime.
President William Ruto had made amendments to the bill, dropping levies on bread, transport of sugar, financial services and motor vehicle tax, proposing instead to increase fuel prices. The new budget is a response to the IMF, which has called the government to increase revenues to reduce its reliance on borrowing. But with high unemployment, inflation and a third of the country living in poverty, many see these additional taxes as punishing the poor. And the way police handled the protests may have worsened the anger on the streets. Gillian Munyeo says her son was shot dead while fleeing from tear gas.
If someone is fighting for their rights, why use live bullets? If he would have been found with any weapons, he would have said there is a problem, but he was walking with his friend.
Rights groups who attended Thursday's protests say spent cartridges implied the use of live rounds.
It's really shocking to learn that we are living in a country where youth are losing their lives for merely exercising their constitutional rights.
But nothing appears to deter these young Kenyans, who say they will remain on the streets until the government scraps its controversial plans to raise taxes. Laura Khan for Inside Story, Al Jazeera.
And we start this hour in Kenya, where the security forces have clashed with hundreds of protesters opposed to tax hikes put forward by the government. Riot police, some on horseback, have been deployed in the capital, Nairobi, and have fired tear gas in an effort to disperse the demonstrators. The Parliament buildings have been cordoned off ahead of the vote by MPs on the controversial finance bill later today. Many fear the tax cuts will worsen a cost of living crisis. Protests are also taking place in the Indian Ocean port of Mombasa and other cities. More than 300 people were arrested earlier this week following similar demonstrations. A little earlier, I spoke to our senior Africa correspondent, Anne Soy.
I'm just standing outside Parliament where that debate has been going on this controversial finance bill. I can hear tear gas being lobbed in all directions. The young people have come out in large numbers. They have gone to different streets and the police are trying to keep them away from here. This is the ultimate goal. They want to come here and occupy Parliament, but they're not being allowed to do that. You can see the cordon here. And they're saying that they want the bill that is being debated in Parliament to be rejected in its entirety. They disagree with many of the clauses there. On Tuesday, the government announced that it was announced concessions on a number of the controversial clauses, including 16% value-added tax on bread, motor vehicle levies, and other taxes. But they say that is not enough. And that's the message that they're trying to pass here. They have been mobilizing and reaching out to them MPs, asking them to reject the finance bill. So that debate is going on here. They don't have a lot of time for that, because they were hoping that they would pass this bill by next week, so that come July they'll have a law in place to be able to spend, to carry out government spending. So today the protests are more widespread across the city and in different towns across the country, including the president's own hometown of Eldoret in Western Kenya.
Yeah, and it's a good point, that, isn't it? Although we're looking at the demonstrations, we're just seeing water cannons being used actually against demonstrators, but these are not just solely in Nairobi, they are elsewhere.
That's right. They're in different towns across the country. Yesterday, they were in the coastal city of Mombasa. And really, what is different about these protests is that it is young people in their 20s. I have, spoken to some teenagers who have come out, and they are so educated about tax issues, and they are debating this, and they're saying, we don't want this, we don't want this. And they're saying that, they have to be heard by government. This is not led by politicians. In fact, they have asked politicians to stay away and come to Parliament to debate those issues and shoot it down before Parliament. And therefore, this is something new in the country. They have been mobilizing on social media, on TikTok and Twitter and other platforms, and they're saying that they will not back down.
And that was our Africa correspondent, Anne Soy, talking to me in the last hour. We will, of course, keep across the developing situation in Nairobi, Kenya.